Hello, my name is Gav Cross. I'm a storyteller, but I also like to read stories, and I read them live on Twitch on a Monday night. Tonight, and the cover's fallen off, I'm going to read from this, the famous Saint of Marks and St. Spencer's. St. Michael? Confusing if you're not from the United Kingdom. Marks and Spencer's are a big shop, but this is their home brand. This is the 65 Great Spine Chillers, collected by the incredibly awesome Mary Danby. Genuinely a watchword in fine collections of supernatural stories. So I've got the book here. Now, the story I'm going to read to you tonight is short, but not so sweet. It's called The Invaders by Tapp. Now, I haven't done any research on Tapp, but I know that I like the name, Tapp. This story is set in the United States of America, but I've just had a conversation here. I'm not going to try the accents. So just imagine that they're British in America. The Invaders by Tapp. They came from the desert in their orderly files, a vast, rampaging army, driven from their own land by shortage of food and an unnatural increase in population. They sought new frontiers. The sick were left by the roadside to die. The young were carried and the elderly were murdered by their own families to conserve the food. And as they breasted the hill, the leader stopped and gazed down into the lush green valley before him. At last, the armies could stop for a while. There's food in plenty for everyone. And there would be time to rest, to eat, and to make love again. Rank on rank, the armies crowded to the top of the hill. Hosts of hungry, desperate marauders. This, then, was the promised land. Seth Kenyon rocked like the pendulum of a clock in his wicker-work chair. He hooked the jug of rough, raw spirit over his left elbow and kissed the lip of the container as if it were a woman. His tongue snaked into the jug, searching and probing. His eyes gazed down at the stained board porch as the liquid warmed and burned his throat. When the jug was empty, all he had to do was shout for Ella to replace it, and another few hours of an interminably boring day would pass away. Narrowing his eyes and looking southwards over the prairie, Seth could just make out the gigantic skeletons of the oil derricks striding across the horizon. He had been smart to sell the south pastures to those oil men, and, who knows, maybe there was more oil to be found on the land he had left to him. So what was there for a man to do? The money was in the bank, and Seth had spent a small fortune diverting the mounting spring to irrigate the flat prairie land. He had paid Sam Harford for the grain, and he had hired the men to plough and sow. Now it was nearly harvest time, and Seth would make a few $1,000s more to add to his already fat bank balance. "Ella!" "Coming, Seth," the voice responded wearily. "You want another jug, honey?" "What else would I be calling you for?" he asked, with a thin leer spreading across his unshaven face. Ella brought the jug out on the porch, gave it to him, and took the empty one in her hands. She looked at it for a moment and started to speak. Seth, honey?" "The answer is no." "But Seth, we've got enough money to have ourselves a nice little place near town. Why can't we live near town?" "I've told you before," Seth growled bad-temperedly. "I've got no use for living near town. First thing, you'll be wanting fancy drapes and wall coverings like they got in the saloon. Then you'll be wanting floor covering and glossy furniture. It ain't no good getting on that way, Ella. You see, it don't stop there. Once you get caught up in your ambitious ways, there's no telling what you'll want next." "I'd be happy with a nice little place," Ella said. "Don't have to be big and grand. Maybe we could have some flowers in the garden. She grinned. It will be a change from acres of maize, Seth. What's so wrong with God's good corn? Seth asked, not hesitating to use God's name when it suited him. Corn has been our living, Ella. Don't you never forget it. And corn liquor will be the death of you, Ella said testily. Why, ever since those old men bought the south pasture, you ain't done a day's work. You just sit out here and drink that gut-rot stuff. Well, what I do is my own business, Seth spluttered. I've married you, fathered a child for you, and provided for you. What more do you expect of a man? Ella could have told him what she wanted: to be loved, to be told now and then that she was pretty. She put her fingers on her face and knew that her skin was dried up and wrinkled by the heat of the sun. Dried up. Where the hell's Alice got to? Seth tried to change the subject. I don't favour her wandering out like she does. She's probably near the foothills, Ella told him absently. The child gets lonely, Seth. Lonely my ass, Seth retorted. Ella turned away. It was no good talking to Seth when he was drunk. But then, Seth was nearly always drunk nowadays. The sun scorched the twisted pine boards on the porch as Seth felt in his overall pocket for his pipe and pouch. Anyway, maybe 100 yards or so, he spied a bob-tailed rabbit. Not so long ago, he would have run into the cabin for his gun and stalked that rabbit. But Seth just let it be. There were sacks of salt meat in the cabin, and preserves too. The larder bulged with flour and tobacco, and the cupboards were crammed with liquor. All the things Seth had been working for his whole life. Now, he had them plenty. If Alice don't get back soon, Seth called, you'd better get out and look for her, Ella. Sometimes a stray cat comes down from the hills. He knew that the mention of a mountain lion got Ella worrying, and it wouldn't be long before she would set out to find Alice. Another swig at the jug and then a puff on the cornpipe. Yes, Seth told himself, I got everything a man could want. He stretched his mind contentedly over the past 12 years from the time when he and Ella had first come to the prairie. It had been rough at first. The land had been cleared, trees had to be chopped down and cabin built. Seth grinned as he remembered the frantic race through summer to get these first few logs in place. If he didn't get the roof on the cabin and the grain sowed, they would all face starvation. Alice was a babe in arms, and Seth had made a skin sack, which he had strapped across Ella's back so that she could work, yet still be near her child. And they had worked in those days. The cabin was soon built, and Ella made it her job to fix the mud for caulking up the framework every day, 10 or 15 times. She would struggle up the North Hill and bring back 2 wooden buckets of water for making mud. 20, sometimes 30 or 40 buckets a day. Then the dusty soil was mixed with a stick and daubed into the open cracks between the logs. Seth had hewn the trees and sawn flat boards from them to make a floor. He had built a fireplace out of stone and even taken time to put a mantel shelf where Ella could display the last remaining pieces of her mother's old tea set. Side by side they'd worked out in the rain-scorching heat, never caring how much their limbs screamed out in pain, as long as they were together and working to one purpose. Purpose. That's what they had then. Maybe Ella was right. Maybe they should move nearer town and take up a new challenge. Seth always felt like this during the second jug of the day. The only times it seemed to matter were when they were working together and doing things together. I'll go get Alice, Ella said, coming out onto the porch and scanning the prairie with her hand over her forehead to shade her eyes from the sun. You reckon she's out near the foothills? Either that, or up near the fork, Seth replied. The fork was the point where Seth had gone one day and promised Ella that she would soon have water from that spring flowing down past her front door. You'll never have to go up this hill again, he promised. I'm going to shift this stream for you, Ella. Why, Seth, Ella had laughed. He still remembered the laugh. In the happy, admiring way she had looked at him. Why, Seth, you're going to kill yourself trying that. Within a week, he'd promised. I'll have that stream parading past your front door within a week. It took him 5 days. And when he finally kicked away the last few boulders to allow the stream to divert into the valley, it felt good. "I'll try the fork first," Ella told him. "No need," Seth said. "I see her now, running, like a deer." "Where? I can't see her." "Over there," Seth said. "She's waving and shouting." "Foolishness," Ella smiled. "Young foolishness." "Yeah," Seth agreed. "See her run, though. She's getting to have a figure already. I fancy she's growing up like you used to be, Ella. She's going to be a fine girl." Seth, there's something wrong with her. Look." Alice was screaming and thrashing her arms in the air. Her hair was flying out behind her as Ella and Seth watched. High, up on the hill, less than 2 miles from the cabin, the armies watched. The legions had now all assembled, and they stood, like statues, waiting for the leader to give the signal. All eyes were on the tiny figure as she soundlessly screamed and ran across the prairie. The scouting party had undoubtedly seen her and would be on their way back to the main body. But the troops were hungry, and the leader knew that he couldn't hold them back for much longer. They had been determined and a disciplined army, following the leader across the most inhospitable desert and out into the lush green lands which lay before them. He glanced around at their emaciated bodies and tired faces. It was time. He raised a clawed arm above his head like a flag, held it there for a second, and then brought it down sharply. The army of ravenous creatures advanced. "Mama, they're coming from the hills!" Alice screamed. "Who, my darling? Who's coming?" Ella cried as she rushed down the porch steps to take her daughter into the open arms. "Ant things! Millions of them! Millions!" Alice beat herself with her hands, brushing off the hundreds of vicious, angry creatures. "Seth, come over here," Ella screamed. "The poor child's smothered in the damn things." "Ants," Seth said. "Blasted anthills. That's what young Alice has been sitting on." "They aren't ants, Seth. Bigger, that by far," Ella cried. "They're biting her, Seth. Come over and help me." "There's more of them, Dad," Alice cried. "Millions and millions of them. They're up on the hill there," she said, pointing into the distance. "Cloud shadows," Seth reckoned, holding his hand to shield his eyes against the glare of the sun. "Help me, Seth," Ella screamed. "By Christ, these things are bitten through to her bones." "What?" "Through to her bones, I say." Seth walked over to examine Alice's legs. There were hundreds of the ant-like creatures gathered around an opening wound. They were raking and clawing back the skin, dipping their claws into the lake of blood and drinking. He could see it plain as day. "Off!" he cried. "Get the damn things off her, Ella! God, it's awful! Evil!" "Get her to the stream, Seth!" Ella screamed, frantically beating at the enraged creatures. "Mama, I can't stand it! Do something, quick!" Seth gathered Alice in his arms and ran across the flower patch to the deepest part of the diverted stream. Without pausing, he waded into the water, brushing and slapping at Alice, scraping off the smothering mass of red creatures. "Damn parasite things!" Seth yelled. "You're hurting, Daddy." "Hold your breath, child." Seth took Alice by the hair and dragging her under the water. As Ella watched helplessly, she looked down into the creaming crystal stream and saw her daughter and her husband. They were 1,000,000 miles away. Water distorted their faces, but she could plainly see Seth staring straight into Alice's face. His eyes had a look of grim determination in them, like the time when Seth was building the cabin. Then, as sure, Ella knew it would be all right. Blood from Alice's wound was gliding out of her leg, pink and filmy in the water. The terrible, bloodthirsty creatures were releasing their hold on her, letting go and floating away with the current. After what seemed to be forever, Seth emerged triumphant. "There," he spluttered. "There now, child. They things won't get at you now." Alice looked at her father, threw her arms around his stubbly neck, and cried like a newborn child. "Come into the house," Ella said, hardly able to keep from crying herself. "Come into the house, my darlings." Arms around each other, they walked towards the house when Seth suddenly let out a cry. "Ella, look over there!" The whole hill was alive, movement, as the army swept down wave after wave of hostile, rampaging creatures. Each one was harmless enough on its own, but as an army, they were invincible. "What the hell is it?" Seth cried. "Them ant things, Daddy," Alice said. "That's what I saw up there in the foothills. They're eating everything in sight." Like a slow-motion scythe, the army cut deeply into the prairie grass, gorging, destroying, and advancing all the time. A bird shrieked in alarm, flying up high into the sky, its whole body thick with insectile life. Feathers dropped as the rapacious creatures fed, even as the bird shrieked higher and higher into the sun. Then, quite suddenly, the battle was over. With a final cry, the bird fell back to the earth and was instantly smothered by the army of devouring creatures. When the whole army had passed over the place where the bird had fallen, there was nothing. No grass, no white bones, no feathers. The destruction was total. "Get into the house," Seth said. "You, get into the house and put Alice up on the top bunk bed." Ella hurried indoors, cradling Alice in her arms. "Water," Seth cried. "I'll divert the stream to the cornfields. That'll stop them." Grabbing a spade in his hands, he ran across the banked-up edges of the stream and started to dig. With any luck, the stream would almost flood the corn and maybe make a crescent around the cabin. But the spade was not fast enough for him. "Ella! Come out and help me, help me!" "Seth, what is it?" "The bank is hard as clay. If I break it with a pickaxe, you drag the lumps away. Hurry, we don't have much time." "Look over there, Seth. The linny tree." He looked over to the edge of the cornfield where the linny tree grew. One day, he had promised, he would chop that hard tree down and make a shed out of it. One day, when he had the time. Together they watched the old tree groan in anguish. It became painted red with the liquid army. It drooped its arms and fell face first into the seething lake of creatures, and within a few minutes it had entirely gone. "Seth, we ain't gonna do nothing about them things," Ella roared. "We don't stand a chance. Let's run while we've got the time." She was right. The armies were advancing mercilessly towards the cabin, stretched out over the hills, and back as far as the eye could see. The vast host of creatures seemed to have one target: the cabin. The sun reflected from their shiny shell-like backs as they wrestled with grass and felled huge stems of bloated corn, yet still they marched purposefully onward. "Get Alice," Seth shouted. "You get her while I whistle up for the horse." Pushing his fingers into his mouth, Seth let out a piercing whistle. "Here, boy!" he yelled. "Come over here!" Suddenly he saw the stallion, pawing the ground near the edge of the corn. Obviously some of the scouting party of the creatures had found him already. Seth let out a shout and ran across the grass towards the horse. "Get off him! Get off him!" He couldn't finish. Even from this distance, he could see that the stallion had given up the fight against such an army. The legs, the belly, and the body filled up with them as they crawled and savaged piteously. Into the eyes, the nostrils, and the gaping mouth. Seth actually saw the teeth shatter out of the mouth of the stallion, groaned, sank to the ground, suffocating and blinded. The pain must have been too great to bear, for the great creature gave a shiver and was still. Then, after a few minutes, the dark pile of seething creatures climbed down, dissolved away. Nothing was left. When Seth turned his attention back to the stream, both Alice and Ella were digging away with their fingers. He ran over and knelt beside them, digging and clawing for life. Still the army advanced, destroying every living thing, animal and vegetable. The cornfields soon became alive with them. The noise was increasing as the stems of corn fell and were devoured as if by blood-red fire. "It's breaking," Ella sobbed. "The bank is breaking, Seth." "Faster, faster," Seth cried. "Faster, darlings, we can do this." With a gurgling noise, the river burst through the remaining banked-up earth and spurted out towards the cornfield. Seth, Ella and Alice were thrown on their backs by the sheer force of the water as it leaped from its prison and spread over the land. "By Christ!" Seth cried. "We got the bastards!" Like a small tidal wave, the water rushed out to meet the advancing army of creatures, carrying mud, stones, and even small rocks with its force. Cleaving a path through the army, the wash sent the creatures hurrying aside in panic, but most were too late. Within a few minutes, the whole cornfield was awash with floating debris and bodies. "We done it!" Seth screamed. "By Christ, we done it!" Now the foothills were bare of the creatures, and the cornfield was awash with the bodies of the dead. Some 100 yards away, the main army had stopped, sensing the danger ahead. The water washed around the log cabin, almost enclosing it completely. "I think we're beaten," Seth said, putting his arm round Ella. "We beaten." "We sure did," Ella sobbed. "We sure beat them, Seth." It was like the old times again, and even Alice sensed the freshness and new life as they walked into the cabin. Meanwhile, out on the prairie, the creatures were dragging the dead bodies out of the water and piling them on top of each other in neat lines. The sun went down and the moon provided light, which has worked furiously to construct a bridge of dead bodies. And when the sun came up again, there was only a stone fireplace to mark the spot where Seth and his family had died. Just a stone fireplace, some household crockery, and a couple of empty liquor jars. The Invaders by Tapp. It's really made me itch. Read by Gav Cross from the St. Michael book of 65 great spine chillers. Oh. Tell me what you thought. How did it make you feel? Did it make you itch? I think I'm really itched. Thanks for your comments, thanks for your likes and your subscriptions. I read these live on Twitch on a Monday. Come and join us.